Hello, everyone. Shane1288 back here from Perfectly Unscientific Gaming and Star Trek Online today. And I wanted to look at the pilot maneuvers because there's a little known feature of these pilot maneuvers that might not be immediately obvious here with these. So this is one of the Tier 6 Andorian pilot escorts that came out not too long ago. I'm using the engineering variant here, and there will be a build and an infected run at the end of this just because. But, these pilot maneuvers let you roll to the left, and you can also roll to the right, dart forward, and dart backwards once this little pilot maneuver bar refills here. But, when you're flying around and you're using your WASD keys, you might accidentally double tap that key when you don't necessarily want to go in that direction. Now you might be wondering, oh, how can I stop that? Like sometimes I might double tap that E key by accident and dart forward. Well, there's actually a way of stopping that. So if you go into your general options here in Stow and go to the keybinds tab, and then go down here to pilot ship maneuver, I've bound this to /, which is actually a button on my mouse, but you could perhaps bind it to something a little bit easier to press, like maybe left shift, for example, in space. That might be a good option, but I'm just using this button here on my mouse. So now if we go to full speed and I press the mouse button and then I press the accompanying direction key, that pilot maneuver will only activate if I'm pressing that button on the mouse. So that means I'm free to double tap my ship buttons and move around. But you might be wondering, okay, you still double tapped and you rolled. Well, you can actually disable that by going into the settings here and disabling double tap to roll. And there we see it's now disabled. And if I double tap, the ship just turns like you would normally expect. But if I hold the mouse button, there's our pilot maneuver. So that's a little bit of a tip here. You might want to go into the options here, keybinds, and bind this to a button like shift, or bind it to something on your mouse like I've done. Then you just press the button, and that's when you activate your pilot maneuvers. And then you're free to double tap the key and have your ship fly around exactly as you want without inadvertently setting those maneuvers off. So now you're probably wondering about the build. Well, let's talk about this here. This is a very standard aux to bat cannon build with some pilot abilities to proc the trait, but we'll get to that in a bit. So as you can see here, cannon scatter volley, attack pattern beta 2, hold together as a heal. It's the second heal on this build, the only of 2 heals. Pilot team, this is just to keep the promise of ferocity trait up. And then in our 2 lieutenant commander engineering slots, running emergency power to weapons, 2 copies of aux to bat, and emergency power to engines, just to reset the evasive maneuvers here when we're flying around. And in addition to that, our engineering team heal, and a little bit of a directed energy modulation to add that energy weapon shield penetration, because that's the theme I'm going for with this build as well. Then just a chemosite and tac team. Optimally, these would be swapped around, but I didn't want to spend the $3 million for a chemosite too. So with that being said, let's have a look at some of the equipment on this ship right now. So here we're running the prolonged phaser dual cannons, the phaser quad cannons from the Tier 4 Defiant, a wide arc dual heavy phaser cannon, and 2 fleet dual phaser cannons from the fleet that have been re-engineered to be damage times 4. Deflector, the colony deflector, basically focusing it around EPS and giving us that crit chance rate and crit severity rate based on our hull health. The competitive engines, which give us a speed boost when we activate our cannon scatter volley. Fleet warp core here. This could probably be replaced out for a fleet colony warp core, but this is good enough for now. And then shields here. Been meaning to get maybe the 2-piece set from the competitive shields, but this Nukara shield works just fine right now. And in the back here, another phaser turret from the fleet, and the trilithium enhanced phaser turret, which I believe is from Beyond the Nexus for this 2-piece set right here, which is gives us a 5% firing cycle haste for our energy weapons and a speed boost. Now down here in the engineering consoles, the second part of that set here, just a bit of power transfer rate, and to complete the 2-piece set. Assimilated module, bioneural infusion circuits. Just hit pause anywhere along the lines if you want to stop and get some more information on these. And then the domino, which is really good for us here because It gives us phaser damage, but it also gives us a boost to accuracy rating, which is something that you're going to see in the traits here. As a theme with this build is to increase the accuracy, because when using cannons, and specifically cannon scatter volley, those are affected by a little game mechanic called accuracy overflow, which means that if your accuracy is higher than your opponent's defense, you gain a modest crit chance and crit severity rate from that extra accuracy. Experimental weapon here is Voice of the Prophets. It's a good weapon. You can use either the railgun or maybe the sheller, but I went with Voice of the Prophets because it's free and you really can't see it when it's flying around, and that's something that has bothered me about some of the experimental weapons, is they don't necessarily fit in with the phaser color. Now, we're running the two-piece synergistic retrofitting set for phaser damage boost here as the two-piece set effect. And, of course, the DPRM console, which everyone should know at this point if you've been following builds, but there it is. It gives us that 40% bonus damage rating when we're above 80% hull, which is immaculate. Then a little bit of an extra shield heal here. This is the Protomatter Field Projector console from the Lucari ship. I run this on this build because it is a way of keeping this alive if I'm not running a dedicated tank in the setup. But if you are running a dedicated tank, you could swap this out to another crit severity console or maybe an accuracy console. Then down here we just got phaser locators for phaser damage and extra crit chance. Now, you might be wondering, why are we running structural integrity collapse? Well, the simple reason is that this ensign engineering slot is just here and I can't do anything with it to make it go away or become a science slot or a universal. And I feel that this is a good ability to take the best one to slot in that spot, because it gives us that physical damage resistance debuff, which is good for our Voice of the Prophets. I use this on large targets like the Gateway, TAC Cube, and Transformers. Now, moving on to the duty officers of this setup here. Emergency Con Officer to recharge our evasive maneuvers when we activate emergency-powered engines. 2 crit severity stacking dops when we fire our energy weapons. And then the 3 technicians to proc Ox to Bat. Now, looking at the skill tree for this build, it's a fairly standard, generic, tactical skill tree here. There's not much to write home about in regards to this. I find it optimal. You could maybe go with something a little bit different. Now, in regards to specializations, Intel and Strategist. Intel mainly for the flanking damage, and Strategist for the extra crit severity and crit chance when being healed when not running threatening stance. Now, for traits on this build, I did say we were going for a bit of an accuracy overflow, so we'll get to there in just a bit. Basic cannon trading here for that extra cannon damage. Inspirational Leader. Duelist Fervor, which gives us an accuracy bonus that stacks up to 3 times for plus 15% at the top. Self-modulating Fire. Point Blank Shot. Ablative Shell is another heal. Fleet Coordinator, because we're flying in a team. A Good Day to Die, so we can activate that go down fighting whenever. And Context is for Kings. Now, trait-wise, running Emergency Weapon Cycle, which reduces the cost of our energy weapons and makes them fire faster. Cold-Hearted is activated by Ox to Bat. Promise of Ferocity activated by our attack powers, and these 2 pilot abilities down here. That's mainly what Pilot Team is for. As you can see here, over time this will stack up to a plus 20% bonus weapon damage, which is pretty substantial. Superior command frequency, so we can call in our fleet support right away. And Withering Barrage, which increases the duration of scatter volley. Then down here in space, Reputation, Tactical Advantage, which increases our armor penetration. Enhanced shield penetration to increase the shield penetration of the weapons, which does stack nicely with directed energy modulation. Crit severity from advanced targeting systems, critical chance from precision, and controlled countermeasures, because that is activated by our Cold-Hearted. So let's have a look at the parse right now. Here you can see we did 115k DPS, most of these coming from the phaser cannons, the wide arc phaser cannons, the quad phaser cannons, and the prolonged phaser cannon. The pets did 12.8k, and looking at that, that was mainly our fleet support, All right, so let's have a look at the run now. But before we do that, if this video was at all useful to you, like or subscribe. If you have questions, you can leave them below, and we'll see you next time.